demands. It's when we're walking into a conversation and hearing what other women are doing. It's like, I got to go do all those things. Or when we're scrolling our social media feeds of like, these are all the areas I'm failing, so I need to do better.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Excellent, as always, to have you along. I have Kathy Knochel and Katie Miller with me here today. Thank you,
Matt.
both of you, for being here. You know, I think every generation is unique and has challenges. I think sometimes we can maybe pretend that our generation has it harder than other generations, which we should probably just not be so self-focused. Certainly generations of the past had tremendous obstacles, things that would make us groan to think, oh my word, how did they live life that way? But if we didn't speak to the uniqueness of our time, we would probably be not servicing our generation well, because we do face things, don't we? And those things matter, and maybe there are uniquenesses to speak to. And I would like that to be done here in this session. And I know you two women have that on your heart as you engage with ladies, right, in this time and in this place. And I want to give you space to speak to that. And I know on your heart is grounding. Would be one of those matters of needed attention. I want to press into that space a little bit. What do we mean by grounding, and what is it unique to our time that makes things unsettled? Kathy?
I just will say, as I'm interacting with women, whether it's in the counseling room or just in my own peer groups or in different places, I feel like the topic that is talked about all the time is all of the demands that we have for our time. I feel like, if anything, it just feels like we can get swept up in the current of our to-do list and demands and activities, and sometimes all good things, but things just get so busy. And I think this topic of grounding is really important, because if we don't take some time to just like purposely ground, look up, look out, see what's going on, we're just going to keep getting carried down current.
And I think some of that makes sense. And I think we can probably, I think we know what they mean by grounding. I want to hear a little bit more about that. But before we go to that, your comment about demands is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a word that carries a lot of weight. Like, are we demanded things? And where does that demand come from? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I
Or
recently
is it self-demand?
Yeah.
Or what?
Or other demand.
Or other
Or
demand?
other demand, yeah.
Are we, in what ways are we being told, demanded to do things?
And that there is the key, Matt. Like, how much do I decide throughout my day? How can I ground myself with it? I just had a conversation with a young mom from a church, and one of her things was, I have so many tabs open throughout the day. I have so many tabs open that to like shut a tab or to be able to close something out, it's really hard, because I can close a couple tabs out with, a domestic task like laundry or cooking or, whatnot for career or something. But then other tabs come open. And I think, just kind of to Kathy's point, balancing those out and having those demands and thinking about that grounding piece of choosing and or fighting potentially demands that maybe could be optional, I think are the key.
I think the question is interesting too, of like, is it self-demand or others' demands? I think almost everybody wants to answer that question, that it's others' demands on our time, our family's time, my time. But sometimes I think the truth is it's self-demands. It's when we're walking into a conversation and hearing what other women are doing. It's like, I got to go do all those things. Or when we're scrolling our social media feeds of like, these are all the areas I'm failing, so I need to do better.
Well, we'll say more about that, Kathy, because that's quite a key. It's quite a statement. Well, these are self-demands and not other demands.
I think what happens, so again, when we are just moving with life so fast, we don't even get a chance to notice all the things that we're collecting. So we have, our schedules are so busy that we don't have the time to walk away from something we've taken in or a conversation we've had and decide, like, is this really something that matters to me? Is this really something I need to step into? We don't always pause to say, should I have said yes to that? Should I have said no? So I think what happens more than anything is it just collects over time. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves knee deep into so many things that maybe aren't right for us, but we're doing it because that's what it feels like we're supposed to be doing.
I do think specifically for women in our amazing gender, I do think God made us relationally and to connect. Males certainly too, but women love the emotion, love the processing, love the relational piece. And so because of that, we are constantly relating and constantly taking in and constantly sorting and processing and wondering, well, she is this and I am not. And this, all of those pieces that the intake, outtake, a lot of intake happens, very little outtake potentially can happen.
Hmm. So how then maybe coach a little bit on that decision making process? Should I not? And are there certain things that we ought to be thinking about?
I do think with decisions, and I do think time, and then that's what I hear you say with decisions. I think time is definitely a piece of grounding our hearts. How do I make decisions on a daily basis? Do I have, that old adage of we used to do those object lessons in Sunday school where you'd have the rocks and then the pebbles, right? And we'd try to everything has to go in the jar. And if you put the pebbles in first, then there's potentially not room for those big foundational rock pieces. And so decision making on that point is, am I focused on a day-to-day basis on those foundational pieces of my life? That
Prioritization.
absolutely is a key for decisions, for discernment, I would say. And I also think staying in the reality. A lot of us love to live in like what we think is happening and what is maybe our ideal versus reality, and just kind of keeping those, like, what is reality? How am I spending my time, right? All of us are given the same amount of time, 24 hours in a day, and just kind of like not charting it necessarily, but how do I spend my time? What do I create? What are foundational rocks to put in my jar? And then what are those pebbles that will fit in amongst the large rocks and the foundational
Hmm.
pieces?
Hmm.
Which I think is interesting because within that is like that prioritization that you talked about. And I think that kind of circles us back to the importance of grounding. Like if we do not take a minute to ground, I think of in this topic, I think about grounding almost as like dropping an anchor, like as if you're in a boat and you drop an anchor, you're still out in the middle of the lake, you're still moving, the boat is still doing what
You
it
still
wants.
feel the waves.
Yes,
You
Mhm.
take the
absolutely.
brunt of the
Yeah.
wind.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
It's
not
still a
tied up.
storm.
Right,
Right. You're not
right,
completely protected, but
right.
you're within that anchor. You're within that hold and that foundation.
Yes.
That is a good
But
example.
it gives you a minute to just pause. Like
Mhm.
there is some level of security here. We can be out here and then you can take a minute to make the decisions, to remember what the priorities are.
Kathy, from a psychological standpoint, I think there is a difference in saying, I do this thing because I feel pressured to do it, or I'm doing this thing because it's important to me. Okay?
Yes.
I'm just gonna come up with an example. All right, that will hit, and hopefully people can kind of change it. But I do pretty planter boxes in the front of my house
Mhm.
because my neighbors do it, and it is kind of an expectation in the neighborhood. Or I do planter boxes because I love flowers
Mhm.
and I love to do that thing. That's a completely different reason, right? Speak to some examples like this. Like how do we think through these things? Because this is where it happens, isn't it not?
Yes. Well, and I think it's interesting because it's the exact same outcome or it's the exact same job, but it's a different mindset behind it.
Mhm.
You're doing it because you enjoy it. You're able to reap the benefits of it. You're probably able to find some joy in it. You're doing it because it's the demand. You're probably having a lot of unhelpful self-talk, a lot of frustration, and it's probably one of those things that you're doing at 10:30 at night when you're already exhausted because you just have to get it
Too many
done.
tabs open.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. I hear motivation come out of there. Let's say everybody does change from planter boxes to, succulents or something
Mm-hmm.
without the pretty color. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what the example is there. But would you still be okay with planter boxes and color? And if they
Mm-hmm.
say yes and it brings me peace, then the motivation is obviously, it gives them joy. It's a bucket filler. It's a healthy outlook. If they say, nope, nope, I'm switching to succulents, that's the thing, the
Mm-hmm.
the motivation there is a little, concerning and a little alarming that
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're doing the planter boxes, because everyone else in the subdivision is doing the planter boxes, not
Hmm.
because of your heart and like your motivation and brings you peace.
Katie and Kathy, I think examples are helpful.
Mm.
So, what are some of those things that become our taskmasters,
Mm.
right? And where are they coming from? That might sound like demands, going back to your earlier point.
I would say I don't like that this is true because I think we all already know this, but I definitely blame technology, like social media,
Mhm.
for a lot of this. Certainly, it's happening in our social circles, the demands, the
Mhm.
all of that. But I think that the problem with it is when we are online, we are scrolling so fast, and there's so much information coming in. I would say that the demands that I see pop up, whether in my circles or with women I'm working with, it can range from things like somebody giving birth, what all the options are there and
Mm.
how to navigate that. And then what used to feel like a really easy option is now there's now like 10 options. And it's what is, if I do it this way, what are these people going to think? Or if I go about it this way, I think about how you structure your home, how you decorate your home, if you do sourdough or use yeast when you're making bread.
Cleanliness of home.
Yes.
Okay, which is something we all like. Yes.
Right.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. But even there's a gradient and an expectation in terms of like, is there never anything on the counter?
Right. Right. Does anybody
Or
live here?
or
Yeah.
does and so there are even those things that yes, we all want, but the standard of these things I fear is out of reach.
And I think what happens too is that it's subtle, right? Like you look at one, you see one thing online, and then you notice somebody's talking about it in your social circle, and it's like you have not thought about it. You didn't really latch onto the idea, but all of a sudden, because it's repetitive and
Mhm.
it keeps coming
Mhm.
back again and again, all of a sudden it's your brain is like, should I be thinking about this?
Yes.
And then you start wondering, and then you're thinking about it, and then things around you start to feel just not right. Like my home maybe isn't good enough, or my planter boxes are not the right shape anymore, and then we just start to feel uncomfortable with how we've done life. And then back to the demands, it just keeps adding the things I should probably change or things I need to do different list.
Something is discipling us. Something is forming us. Something is creating what we need, that sensacious appetite. And social media cannot, for our generation, cannot be dispelled. It is giving us rapidly, repeatedly. It's figuring out algorithms for us. And to use it and steward it and ground it wisely in our lives is key because repeated exposure to it will become my formation. It will become it.
Well, I think
There's
what
no denying that.
we are changed over time
Hmm.
with repetition and able to do extraordinary things or change we change in a great deal of ways, right? We ask ourselves, how did I get to the point where I cared so much about this one thing
Yep.
that it has become to master me? Like, where did that ever come from? I used to not care about this. Well, repetition over time will do that.
Yeah.
I think too accountability towards that is key when you think of habits. I know I of myself, left to my own vices, potentially will not choose the most healthy, accountable things. And so I feel like for females to take ownership of that, to continue to live in accountable relationships or live in reality, have close relationships where you are talking about this, you're accountable to that, I think is key. And one of the things with, we've mentioned social media, our phone, it's an amazing device to form potentially bad habits, but it's also a device that could potentially help us create good accountability and real metrics.
I like that we're pushing into the space of what we do about it. You mentioned reality. A close word to that is realistic. Kathy, I'm wondering if some of your conversations with people do center around realism, and do we have a good grasp of realism? Is that part of the answer here?
Oh, so absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, we as people do not always do well being able to get really close to reality
Hmm.
because that can feel really uncomfortable. So if we are somebody that is super busy all the time, or We have a lot that we're doing. There is a potential that that is because slowing down and facing what reality is really painful.
Mhm.
And so how close we can get to reality is probably how well we are taking care of the way we're thinking, how well we're able to manage the distress and the feelings that we have, how much has either happened in the past or is going on
Mhm.
currently. So I 100% agree that in order to be able to navigate all these things we're talking about, we have to be able to look at reality in the face and see what is actually happening versus what am I thinking or what did I tell myself versus what actually happened. But that can be incredibly hard to do.
It can be.
Kathy, it's interesting that you said that. It sounded to me like we have two things going on with reality. One is a reality that is elusive, that we may pine for,
Hmm.
which is not a reality.
Right.
And then there is the reality that is staring us in the face that we don't like. Okay? So let's go with the reality that we're trying to escape. Does that sounds painful.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
So where do you go with that?
So unfortunately, the answer is we actually have to get closer to it. We actually have to do what we're talking about today, and we have to ground ourselves. We have to take a minute and we have to connect with what's happening, what we're afraid of, what we're hurt about, what we're sad about, and actually getting closer to it so that we can process it, we can bring accountability into it, we can build habits to work with it or, whatever it is. And we actually have to get closer. But again, as I said, I
Mhm.
think unfortunately we're filling our lives to do the opposite.
And I think another piece, getting closer to it and getting thinking about reality, is also the emotions and understanding the emotions, and emotions not being truth, emotions being fickle, emotions changing. That is reality. And being able to sit with those emotions, whether they're not healthy or,
Yeah.
good, and just focus on, okay, this, I'm sensing these emotions, this must be true, and being able to discern through that and what that is.
Yeah. And I think a good example of that, so this isn't even necessarily like a super heavy thing that somebody might be trying to avoid, but I think so often we can have an interaction with somebody that feels uncomfortable. So there's the emotion, right? This felt uncomfortable. So then we tell ourselves a story.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
they are disappointed in me, they don't like me, they think they're better than me, whatever story we tell ourselves. And that can be not grounded in reality because we really have no proof of that other than that emotion.
Mhm.
Like emotions are God gave us them for a reason. They're important, but if we make all of our decisions around those emotions, then we're going to just be drifting out there. Versus like being able to bring that situation to reality and say like, do I actually have evidence that this person feels this way?
Yeah.
Why would they? Can I approach them and ask them questions? Can I just do the vulnerable thing and go engage with them anyway and see what the outcome is?
This is good. Okay. Facing this reality thing. I'm just going to give an example again, right? May hit, may not, but again, just illustrate this because I think, and I want you to respond to it and get to some of the finer details of what it looks like to to face one's reality. All right. So somebody might feel the pressure to live outside their means,
Hmm.
right? Would be a good example. Like
Absolutely.
the real life is this. It's taking these types of trips and wearing these types of clothes. When they have to come to the realization, is like, you know what? That is not in our budget. That would be facing reality. Okay. So where do you go with that? And again, this is an example that illustrates, hopefully, this larger point. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into counseling in that space. What are some
Yeah.
categories?
So I think at a high level, I think that's a good example because we can just be practical about it. At one level, you have to do the acknowledgement of like, there's a problem here.
Hmm.
We're living outside our means. And then you have to feel the emotion of fear, frustration, anger, anxious, whatever emotion is there.
Regret.
Yes, regret. That's a
Mhm.
good one. Yeah. So acknowledge it. You have to feel the emotion. And a phrase that we use with kids a lot is like you have to name it to tame it.
Yeah.
So be able to name the emotion there. And then I would say that actually is where I think the processing has to happen. How did we get to this point? So you have to be vulnerable with yourself and or like your spouse or accountability person, whoever. How did we get to this point? What could have I done different? What could have you done different? What's the solution? So I think, I guess my brain there goes to, it sounds like budgeting is going to happen, or it sounds like there's going to have to be some, like, even though we really want to do this, we can't do this. Like there has to be
That
some,
sounds like acceptance to me.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then there has to be the working with it, right? There has to be the habit, small overtime habits, whether that's thinking changes of like, just because I want it doesn't mean I need it. The list goes
Yeah,
on.
yeah. The wants and the needs.
Yeah.
Or the self-evaluation, right? That, well, I've evaluated myself on this measure of affluence,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I need to do an evaluation on a different metric.
There are just so many things that we've just always done it this way, or we just have made the assumptions along the way that we're irreplaceable, or the whole world will fall apart if we
Yes,
don't, or
yes.
our kids won't do as well if we
Yeah.
don't do everything that we can to make them happy or whatever.
Katie, I think you've already spoken to some important grounding things. Expand on any of those or introduce new ones.
Yeah. This is going to sound like the Sunday school answer. How much time am I spending in the Word? What disciplines am I doing as far as prayer goes? What does confession look like when I know my heart's not in a good spot? And do I have that, close friend who I can trust and I can be vulnerable with? Can I get quiet? Can I quiet every noise? Can I close every tab? And can I get quiet to listen to the Spirit? No music, no podcast, no walking and exercising with, great intake. Again, great things, but potentially, can I just get quiet and listen for the Spirit and think through my thoughts, clear my head? I just, I think that's a key one. And it's one that I have to purposely choose. And it's the antithesis of the culture screaming so many, keep tabs open, Katie. You're successful if you keep doing this. You are accomplished if you do this. And so it's a countercultural message that I feel like in the life of a believer, the life of us being sisters in Christ is so, so key. Can I get quiet? Can I listen? I think God can speak in the busy, but I think he speaks louder in the quiet. And I think that's a good discipline and a habit to encourage one another in. Another one I challenge myself with a little bit in just conversations I have is how much of my conversation is a spiritual nature? Am I having spiritual conversations? Like, when have I used Bible words in a conversation recently? Maybe it's not just scripture, that would be great, but scriptural principles, things like holding up honesty, modesty, purity. What does that look like in a conversation? And so just thinking through those. When's the last time I had a conversation? Can I have a conversation, or do I just kind of keep things, surface level? It's easier. It's not quite hard. It's not vulnerable, things like that. Yeah, and just to help me, that helps ground me in truths. It helps remind me of those foundational rocks in my jar.
Katie, I 100% agree with you on the getting quiet. I think that sentence of, can you shut the podcast off and can you shut the music off? And of course, shut social media off. I think that actually terrifies people.
It does.
And I would say I see that probably in the young adults I work with, maybe like the college age, just working, just the AirPods
Yes.
in your ears all the time, something always going.
Yeah.
You do not have time to sit down and discern. And then those in turn are, back to that question of like, those are discipling you because they're slowly changing your mindset on a topic. I know I had somebody tell me once, I didn't even know that I cared about this topic until I heard this podcast. Then I went down like a rabbit trail, and then I had to become an expert on this topic that did not change their life at all.
It is amazing when I just get quiet because it forces me in my own heart, if I'm honest with myself, to kind of confess that ugly of like, I'm accomplished if I do this. I can control if I do this. And it speaks to those really hard areas that I just need to get quiet. I need to listen. I need to hear and sense his spirit. I'm not there yet. I'm forming it because I'm a doer. I need to get things done on my to-do list on a day-to-day. And so that is very hard, but maybe if I put it on my to-do list, get
Yes,
quiet,
yes.
then I can check it off. No,
So,
it's just beautiful. It has really begun to transform who I am and listening to His
all right.
Spirit.
So something you've mentioned now twice, which might be maybe an outgrowth of silence, is confession. You mentioned that twice. And let me set this up a little bit. I've been giving this one actually quite a bit of thought. A number of years ago, I went to Israel, and when you see the holy sites in Israel, it's typically in a very large cathedral. And a staple artifact in a cathedral is the confessional box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're Protestants, so we don't think this way, and
Yes.
that's not a part of our normal practice, right? And so I want you to hear me out on this. I'm not suggesting that necessarily is the way we need to do it, but what it did for me every time I was in and out of a church is I passed that artifact, as I thought, am I being honest with myself? It was a visual
Mm-hmm.
call
Mm-hmm.
to honesty. What am I fooling myself with?
Mm-hmm.
And so confession of sin, yes, we kind of have a long understanding of that. But I want to raise this matter of confession of like, this is what I want. This is what I'm wanting. This is what I'm believing. This is what I'm thinking. This is the real reason why I'm doing this with my kids, or I'm expecting this out of my child, or the real reason why I'm running here and I'm running there. This is the real reason why I'm doing these chores in the house. Okay, that's raw honesty to another level. Kathy, and I would imagine you see that in your office in ways that typically we don't do. What's the remedy that comes? What's the health that comes from that type of honesty?
The word identity came up for me when you were saying all
Mm-hmm.
of that,
Mm-hmm.
of like it helps us be able to ground in who I am, or sometimes just being aware that all of that is going on. Like if we pause and ask ourselves those questions, it should be able to help us start making better decisions so that we can be thinking about who am I wanting to become. I would say that when I'm able to have all of this kind of out on the table with someone and we're able to realize like I'm doing this for that reason, or and we start to uncover that, then we start asking the question, okay, when you did that, is that who you want to become? Is that
Mm-hmm.
did that decision help inform who you're working towards?
Mm.
One thing I have found helpful in a practical sense to what your heart, I think, is there, Matt, is for myself and some other young girls that I've talked to, it's really hard to say things out loud for the first time. It's very hard to say things. So, I'll ask them about scripture reading. Fine, it's good. For myself, Katie, yes, how are you doing? It's good. What are you reading in? Oh, I'm in the Old Testament, Minor Prophets. Okay, great. What I find is if myself or others actually write down some of these things, these prayers, journal some of the, confessional or scriptures or whatnot, and then it's almost like it goes from like the heart to something, written, and then I can like say it out loud. It's an amazing, whether it's a gratitude journal, that's a positive spin on it. But then there's also that piece of like, Lord, I have been prideful over my time management. I totally know I am a doer and I have to work on just like finding grace to step aside and just give it, to you. It is
I think
amazing
that's a
that.
good example, right? That's a good example of
Mhm.
modeling it. I am prideful about
My to-do
this
list.
very
Absolutely.
thing.
Yes.
And to sit with that confession, that honesty, that this is why I do it.
Mhm.
It has a lot of good
Yeah.
outcomes. And I could fool you by saying I do it for these outcomes, but it's really for this
I
reason.
just recently had a conversation with a good friend of mine and a sister in Christ, and I remember she challenged me on something, and I said to her, I'm like, "Oh, that's the Katie Miller I want to be. It's not the Katie Miller I am now." And I
Hmm.
said it, and I was like, "Oh, that's really that was hard."
Vulnerable.
It was very vulnerable, and she just sat with it
Yeah.
and loved me through it. But that was hard. That was really hard. I had not journaled that before, but
Yeah.
I had journaled the prayer of where I knew I was at with a specific struggle I had, and so that was it. It was just really
But you found value in voicing that to a
absolutely
person.
because all of a sudden
Yeah.
I had it out, and it was. It was a connector. It was speaking the gospel of repentance, and I need forgiveness, and this is really hard right now, and I need help and accountability through this.
And sometimes after we've been able to acknowledge the truth underneath it, I think that there's a aspect of grief that has to come up for us
Mm.
too. Of like,
Mhm.
look at all of the things that I have been doing in the last 6 months, 2 years,
Mhm.
5 years, out of because I was trying to manage the demands more than living in who Christ called me to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned before, who do you want to become? We've got lots of things we want to become, and not all of them are possible.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And
Ooh,
we
but they
should
could
mention
be.
we should mention that who are we supposed to be becoming in Christ,
There you
right?
Yeah.
go.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Thanks, Katie, Kathy. Thanks for this conversation. I think it will has stirred all of us to think a little bit deeper about the
Mm.
motivational piece. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And then that discipleship piece. Who am I becoming by the rhythms that I'm living? And how can those be offered to God? Yeah. God bless you, each one, for listening. I hope and pray this has been good for you.